The festivities began on July 23rd, a little over a week before the official trade deadline. The Astros were competitive for the first year after 3 straight seasons with over 100 losses and a 70-92 campaign in 2014. They were eager to strike a deal, and they found one with their division rival in the Oakland Athletics, who were last in the division with a 44-53 record and noted sellers. The Astros would acquire Scott Kazmir, a left-handed starter who was excellent for the Athletics and solid for Houston down the stretch. In return, Oakland received Daniel Mengden, once owner of the craziest stash in the game, and Jacob Nottingham, who's undergone transaction hell in the current season. A day later, the Mets, who were a game above 500 at 49-48 and second in the NL East despite having the least runs scored in the National League to that point, sought reinforcements. This was yet another interdivision trade where New York brought in Juan Uribe and Kelly Johnson, who'd prove vital to their eventual pennant run. The big piece who left in return was John Gant, who's been dependable for the Cardinals for 5 seasons now after only 1 year in Atlanta. These moves were mildly interesting and had no real long-term effects post-2015. Deadline noise would actually go quiet for a day and then completely erupt on July 26th with a blockbuster move. The Royals were a year removed from being 1 win away from a World Series title, and they were eager to make a move to show everyone how serious they were about the 2015 season. They sat with a 7.5 game lead in the AL Central, but the acquisition of Johnny Cueto would solidify their reign on the division. The haul that Cincy got in return was serious. Well, it was at the time. The Reds would acquire Brandon Finnegan, a former 2014 first-round pick, who'd debut the same year and pitch meaningful postseason innings for the Royals. He was the number 6 prospect in the Royals system, which was decently loaded at the time, and was supposed to be a big pickup for the Reds in the coming years. Sadly, he and the other 2 pitching prospects they acquired never really put things together. 2 days later, on July 28th, another blockbuster deal filled the baseball world with noise. The Toronto Blue Jays, who were only 50-51 at the time, were desperate to catch their rivals in the American League East and not let the 2015 season slip away. They'd make some crucial moves that would eventually carry them to the ALCS that year. First was the deal with the Colorado Rockies, dead last in the NL West and looking to offload their pieces. In a shocking move, they'd send longtime face of the franchise Troy Tulowitzki north of the border, along with LaTroy Hawkins. This move was bound to happen eventually, but it sent shockwaves through the league nonetheless. Tulowitzki's numbers in Toronto were underwhelming, but he remained an important piece of the team. Still, it looked as though Colorado made the correct move in dealing him. The haul they got in return, well, that didn't pan out to plan either. They received Jose Reyes. Remember when Jose Reyes was a Colorado Rocky? Also packaged in the deal was Jeff Hoffman, then number 4 prospect for the Jays and number 89 in MLB. His Colorado years went exactly as expected, but he'd turned things around this year in Cincinnati. Also included in the deal from Toronto was Miguel Castro, flipped to Baltimore later and now relieving games for the New York Mets. Many thought Toronto would be done after this, but they'd shock everyone once again soon after. But we'll get back to them in a minute. The very same day, the Kansas City Royals made their presence known once again, with one of the first deals to have serious, long-lasting effects. They'd acquire a really dependable bat in Ben Zobrist from the Oakland A's, who were continuing to wheel and deal their key pieces. He was another integral piece of their lineup down the stretch, playing multiple positions and providing a key contact bat in their lineup. But the main piece that went back to Oakland, well, that would be one Sean Manaea, who bounced back from Tommy John surgery and is a current Cy Young candidate in 2021. While Kansas City definitely loved the benefits that Zobrist provided for them, they would absolutely love to have Manaea's arm right about now. Still on the same day, the Washington Nationals got involved in the deadline as well, looking to stave off the Mets and keep the NL East for themselves. They sought out bullpen help from their division rival, the Philadelphia Phillies. Their acquisition of Jonathan Papelbon looked great at the time, but it would backfire to say the least. In return, they'd send over Nick Pivetta, who toiled in Philadelphia for a few years but really started to piece things together this year as a Boston Red Sox. Again, another arm that team could definitely use right now. That would be the last big deal for July 28th, but things would continue to heat up for the final 3 days. On July 29th, the Texas Rangers kicked things off with their acquisition of 2 big arms, once again from the Philadelphia Phillies. This looked to be the biggest deal of the trade deadline, as heading to Texas were Cole Hamels and Jake Diekman, 2 left-handed pitchers that helped propel them from 4 games under 500 at the time to eventually the American League West crown. Because of their caliber and years of control on the contract, Philadelphia got a massive haul of players that pinned them the winners of the deal at the time. This notion did not last long, however. The big names that they got back would eventually flame out, like Jake Thompson, Nick Williams, Jared Eichhoff, and Alec Asher. And the only notable piece became catcher Jorge Alfaro, who was eventually flipped to Miami in the JT Realmuto deal. So much for that. Just when it looked like the Texas Rangers made the definitive blockbuster move of the deadline, up stepped the Toronto Blue Jays once again. It's as exciting as it is discombobulating to be traded from your team mid-season, and those factors get multiplied exponentially when it somehow happens in back-to-back years. And this is what happened to David Price. Price would be flipped to Toronto for a collection of prospect arms, most notably Daniel Norris and Matt Boyd. Norris was the number 25 prospect in the league and top of the list in the Blue Jays farm system, and it was believed he was the centerpiece of the deal. But in terms of long-term effects, it would be Matt Boyd who proved to be the larger part. But with Detroit remaining non-competitive from 2015 to our current season, the haul was mostly forgotten. As for David Price, he was the frontline ace that the Blue Jays desperately needed. His tenure in Toronto wasn't long, but his 9-1 record in 11 games started was a necessary piece to Toronto's ride to the AL East crown, one definitely worth mortgaging part of their future. Also happening on July 30th was a massive 13-player swap between three teams that didn't make much of a difference at all for any of them, which is kind of funny. Joakim Soria also went to the Pirates in exchange for Jacoby Jones, and the Tigers didn't get much out of any of their hauls, which is a bummer. The final bomb drop of July 30th needs some proper context, though. Days before, a leaked tweet told the masses that beloved Mets infielder Wilmer Flores would be packaged with sideline starter Zach Wheeler in exchange for spark plug center fielder Carlos Gomez. However, the Mets would go on to deny that this deal had any notion of coming together.
Here's a gay kid in the middle of the game who everybody in the ballpark thinks he's traded, but him. Because I haven't said anything to him. Somebody came to me and said, Wilmer's crying. So why? Well, he got traded. To who? For what?
Resulting in a whirlwind week full of emotion that would eventually steer the Mets towards a much more favorable deal the next day. Carlos Gomez would remain on the move, however, along with teammate Mike Fiers, heading to the Houston Astros for arguably the best prospect haul of any deal from this year, and the only one where each prospect would make the bigs and have an impact. Gomez and Fiers would be really underwhelming for Houston, and though those pieces were needed for them to compete in the playoffs, it would not be worth the haul that they gave away to get them. The Brewers smartly acquired elite closer and three-time All-Star Josh Hader, along with a solid, dependable rotation arm in Adrian Hauser, both of whom are still playing for them today and quite well at that. Also included in the deal was Domingo Santana, who put together a solid 2017 season for the Crew, along with fabled World Series hero Brett Phillips now getting regular reps for the Rays in Tampa Bay. This was one of many deals that the Brewers got right in the 2015 season, and these moves ultimately led them to be competitive down the line. And Houston would eventually get their ring in 2017, but they definitely didn't benefit as much as they wanted to from these deadline deals. This would close out July 30th and usher in July 31st, the last day for deals to get done, and things were not slowing down at all. The San Francisco Giants kicked things off by dealing for Mike Leake, and while he was solid for them in the rotation, it wouldn't be enough for a playoff push. That would have to wait until next year. In return, the Reds acquired Adam Duvall, one of the best power hitters in the league to this day and now a Miami Marlin. He'd make the All-Star team the very next season for the Cincinnati Reds. The Orioles were pushing for a second consecutive deep playoff run, and they acquired a dependable bat from the Brewers in Gerardo Parra. The Brewers, who I now deem the irrefutable winners of the 2015 deadline, acquired another key piece for their eventual 2018 NLCS run. This time it was Zach Davies, another arm that Baltimore would have loved to have in coming seasons. The O's would finish a 500 team at 81-81, and Zach Davies would be dependable for years on end for the Milwaukee Brewers, starting over 100 games for them down the stretch. But the ultimate deadline day deal became the most memorable one at that, and it came just in time for the New York Mets. The Mets were fully aware that their offense was ill-equipped to compete in the postseason, and they had missed the window on Carlos Gomez completely. Then again, they were lucky to do so in hindsight. Instead, another Detroit deal fell into their lap this time, as they'd acquire Yoenis Cespedes in exchange for Michael Fulmer and Luis Cessa. Cespedes had an incredible second half that carried them to the NL East crown and eventually the NL pennant. And the Tigers didn't come out too shabby either, as Michael Fulmer would be named the AL Rookie of the Year the following season. Both would implode for their teams down the line, but at the time this looked like a very fair, squared away deal. And that looked like the end of the insane 2015 trade deadline. Oh wait, no. I have one more thing here. Hang on. Right, there it is. The Rangers got Sam Dyson from the Marlins, and he'd go on to do this.
From Dyson. Batista with a drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Great.